Chapter 4 Discovering Windsor Castle and Windsor Great Park. The next morning, we woke up early, feeling refreshed and excited for another day of exploration. After a hearty breakfast at the hotel, Mr. Johnson gathered us in the lobby and said, "Today, we are going to visit two amazing places, Windsor Castle and Windsor Great Park. These are some of the most beautiful and historic spots in the UK. Are you all ready?" We all nodded eagerly. Windsor Castle was one of the oldest and largest inhabited castles in the world, and Windsor Great Park was known for its stunning landscapes and gardens. We couldn't wait to see them. We boarded the bus and set off towards Windsor, a town located to the west of London. The journey was short, but the excitement made the time fly by. As we drove through the countryside, we saw rolling green hills, charming villages, and quaint cottages with colorful gardens. The sky was clear and the sun was shining brightly, making it a perfect day for sightseeing. When we arrived in Windsor, the first place we visited was Windsor Castle. As we approached, the castle looked even more impressive up close. It stood majestically with its tall towers, grand entrance, and beautiful gardens surrounding it. The castle was made of white stone, and its windows sparkled in the sunlight. Mr. Johnson led us through the large gates, and we entered the castle grounds. "Windsor Castle is the official residence of the Queen," he explained. "It has been home to British kings and queens for over 900 years. Today, it is still used by the royal family for official events and ceremonies." We walked along the castle's path, admiring the intricate designs and the well-maintained gardens. The air was filled with the scent of blooming flowers, and we could hear birds singing in the trees. It was a peaceful and beautiful place. Our first stop inside the castle was the state apartments. These rooms were used for official ceremonies and were decorated with magnificent paintings, tapestries, and antique furniture. Mr. Johnson pointed out some of the most important rooms, like the St. George's Hall, where important meetings and events take place. "We are standing in a room that has seen many important events in British history," Mr. Johnson said. "This hall is named after St. George, the patron saint of England." We moved from one room to another, each more impressive than the last. The ceilings were high and beautifully decorated, and the walls were adorned with portraits of past monarchs. It was fascinating to see how the castle had been preserved over the centuries. Next, we visited the St. George's Chapel, one of the oldest and most beautiful chapels in the world. The chapel was filled with beautiful stained glass windows that cast colorful patterns on the floor. The air inside was cool and quiet, creating a serene atmosphere. Mr. Johnson shared some interesting facts about the chapel. Many royal weddings and funerals take place here. It is also the final resting place for several kings and queens, including King Henry VIII's wife, Queen Catherine of Aragon. We took a moment to appreciate the peacefulness of the chapel, standing quietly as we admired the intricate designs and the sense of history that surrounded us. After exploring the state apartments and St. George's Chapel, we headed outside to the castle grounds. The gardens were vast and beautifully maintained, with colorful flowers, neatly trimmed hedges, and tall trees providing shade. We walked along the paths, enjoying the fresh air and the beautiful scenery. Mr. Johnson pointed out some interesting features of the gardens. These gardens have been designed and redesigned by many royal gardeners over the years. They include a mix of formal gardens, woodland areas, and open spaces for recreation. We found a perfect spot under a large oak tree to rest and have a snack. We sat on the grass, eating our sandwiches and enjoying the warm sunshine. Some of us took pictures of the castle and the gardens, capturing memories of our visit. After our break, we continued our tour of Windsor Castle. We visited the semi-state rooms, which were used by the royal family for more private events. These rooms were also beautifully decorated, with luxurious furnishings and stunning artwork. Mr. Johnson explained, the semi-state rooms are used for smaller gatherings and family events. They are less formal than the state apartments, but still showcase the elegance and history of the royal family. As we explored more of the castle, we learned about the different functions of each room and how the royal family has used the castle throughout history. It was amazing to think about all the people who had walked these halls before us and the important events that had taken place here. After a full day of exploring Windsor Castle, it was time to visit our second destination, Windsor Great Park. We boarded the bus again and headed towards the park, eager to see its natural beauty. Windsor Great Park was vast, covering over 4,800 acres of land. As we entered the park, we were greeted by the sight of rolling green hills, ancient woodlands, and beautiful gardens. The park was a perfect blend of natural beauty and carefully maintained landscapes. Mr. Johnson said, Windsor Great Park has been a royal park since the 13th century. It was originally used for hunting and as a private retreat for the royal family. Today, it is open to the public and offers many beautiful walking trails and scenic views. We started our walk along one of the main paths, surrounded by tall trees and vibrant flowers. The air was fresh, and the sound of birds chirping filled the atmosphere. It was a peaceful and relaxing place, a perfect contrast to the grandeur of Windsor Castle. As we walked, we came across several points of interest within the park. We saw the Virginia Water Lake, a stunning artificial lake with a beautiful waterfall cascading into it. The water sparkled in the sunlight, and we could see ducks swimming peacefully on the surface. Virginia Water Lake is one of the most picturesque spots in the park, Mr. Johnson explained. It's a great place for photography and enjoying the tranquility of nature. We continued our walk and soon reached the Savile Garden. This large ornamental garden was filled with a variety of plants, flowers, and trees from all over the world. The garden was beautifully arranged, with colorful blooms and neatly trimmed hedges creating a vibrant and inviting space. Mr. Johnson shared, Savile Garden is known for its collection of rare and exotic plants. It is a wonderful place to explore and learn about different types of flora. We spent some time exploring the garden, admiring the different plants and taking in the lovely scents of the flowers. It was a wonderful opportunity to relax and appreciate the natural beauty around us. After exploring Savile Garden, we decided to take a short break by the Long Walk. This famous tree-lined path stretched for over 2 miles, leading from Windsor Castle to the Copper Horse statue. As we walked along the Long Walk, we enjoyed the stunning views of the castle and the surrounding park. The path was lined with the tall, straight trees, creating a beautiful canopy overhead. The grass was green and well maintained, and there were benches along the way where people could sit and enjoy the scenery. As we walked, Mr. Johnson pointed out some interesting features along the Long Walk. This path was originally used by the royal family for walks and parades. The Copper Horse statue at the end was created to commemorate the Golden Jubilee of Queen Elizabeth II. We reached the end of the Long Walk and stood in front of the impressive Copper Horse statue. The statue depicted a horse and rider in a dynamic pose, capturing the spirit of movement and strength. It's incredible to see how much history and beauty is contained within Windsor Great Park, Mr. Johnson said. This park has been a favorite retreat for the royal family for centuries, and it's wonderful that we can all enjoy its beauty today. After exploring the park, we made our way back to the bus, feeling content and happy after a day filled with both historical and natural wonders. The journey back to the hotel was smooth, and we chatted about our favorite parts of the day. As we arrived at the hotel, the sun was beginning to set, casting a golden glow over the landscape. We boarded the bus and took one last look at Windsor Castle and Windsor Great Park from the window, appreciating the beauty and history we had witnessed. "Today was amazing," Jack said. "I loved seeing the castle and walking through the park. It felt like we were part of history." "I agree," Sarah added. "Windsor Castle is so grand, and the park is so peaceful. It was a perfect day." Mr. Johnson smiled and said, "I'm glad you all enjoyed it." Tomorrow we have another exciting day planned, so make sure you get a good night's rest. As we settled into our seats on the bus, we felt grateful for the opportunity to explore such incredible places. The tour was not only fun, but also educational, helping us learn more about the UK's rich history and beautiful landscapes. As the bus drove us back to the hotel, we talked about what we had seen and what we were looking forward to tomorrow. The day had been long, but it was filled with unforgettable experiences that we would cherish forever. We knew that each day of this tour was bringing us closer to understanding the history and culture of the UK, and we couldn't wait to see what the next day's adventure would hold. Chapter 5. A Day at the British Museum. The next morning, we woke up filled with excitement for another day of discovery. After breakfast, Mr. Johnson announced, "Today we are going to visit the British Museum." This museum is one of the most famous in the world and has a vast collection of artifacts from different cultures and time periods. Are you all ready to explore history? We all cheered, eager to see what the museum had in store for us. After gathering our things, we boarded the bus and set off towards London. The journey was short, and soon we were in front of the impressive entrance of the British Museum. As we stepped off the bus, we marveled at the museum's grand architecture. The entrance was adorned with tall columns and a large glass roof that let in natural light. It looked like a palace dedicated to history. "Welcome to the British Museum," Mr. Johnson said, leading us inside. This museum houses over 8 million works, representing the history of the world from ancient times to the present. Let's explore. Once inside, we were greeted by the vastness of the museum. It felt like stepping into a treasure trove of history. We received a map and divided into smaller groups, so we could explore the different sections of the museum more easily. The first stop for my group was the Ancient Egypt section. As we walked in, we were surrounded by fascinating artifacts from one of the oldest civilizations in history. We saw mummies, ancient jewelry, and beautiful hieroglyphics carved on stone. "This is amazing," I exclaimed as I gazed at a sarcophagus, the ornate coffin used to bury Egyptian royalty. "I never thought I would see something like this in person." "Look at the details," Sarah pointed out. "The carvings are so intricate and beautiful." Mr. Johnson explained, the ancient Egyptians believed in the afterlife, and they prepared their tombs with everything the deceased would need for their journey. These artifacts help us learn about their culture and beliefs. We spent time admiring the artifacts and taking pictures. There was so much to see, and we could feel the history surrounding us. After exploring ancient Egypt, we moved on to the Greek and Roman antiquities section. Here, we saw magnificent sculptures and pottery that dated back thousands of years. The highlight was the Elgin marbles, which were originally part of the Parthenon in Athens. These marbles are known for their beauty and detail, Mr. Johnson said. They depict scenes from Greek mythology and were created over 2,400 years ago. We stood in awe, admiring the artistry and craftsmanship of the ancient Greeks. It was hard to believe that these pieces had survived for so long. Next, we headed to the Mesopotamia section, where we learned about the ancient civilizations that existed between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. We saw clay tablets with cuneiform writing, one of the earliest forms of writing in human history. "These tablets are fascinating," I remarked. "They show how early humans recorded information and communicated." "Exactly," Mr. Johnson replied. "Writing was a significant advancement for human civilization. It allowed people to keep records and share knowledge." As we continued exploring, we made our way to the Asia section. We were greeted by beautiful artifacts from countries like China, Japan, and India. The intricately designed pottery and stunning silk garments captured our attention. "This vase is so colorful and elegant," Jack said, admiring a Chinese vase with delicate designs. "It's amazing how different cultures express their art," Sarah added. "Each piece tells a story about its people." We spent time wandering through the Asian exhibits, learning about the traditions and customs of various cultures. Each artifact had a unique story, and it was fascinating to connect them to the people who created them. After a busy morning, we gathered in the museum cafe for lunch. As we enjoyed sandwiches and snacks, we shared our favorite discoveries from the museum so far. I loved the Egyptian section, I said. Seeing the mummies was surreal. The Greek sculptures were my favorite, Sarah replied. They were so beautifully crafted. I liked the Asian artifacts, Jack said. The colors and designs were stunning. After lunch, we headed to the African and American sections. We were excited to learn about the rich histories and cultures represented in these areas. We saw masks, textiles, and tools that reflected the lives of different communities. In the African section, we learned about various tribes and their traditions. The vibrant colors of the textiles and the intricate designs of the masks told stories of the cultures they represented. "This mask is so unique," Sarah remarked. "It looks like it has a lot of meaning behind it." Mr. Johnson nodded. Masks are often used in ceremonies and celebrations, representing different spirits or ancestors. Each mask has a purpose and tells a story. In the American section, we explored artifacts from Native American cultures, learning about their history and traditions. We saw beautiful beadwork and pottery, reflecting the artistry of these communities. "This pottery is so different from what we saw in the other sections," I noted. "It has a unique style that represents its culture." As the day went on, we visited the Middle East and prehistoric sections, where we learned about early humans and their way of life. The tools and artifacts showed how our ancestors lived, hunted, and created art. "This is incredible," I said as we examined ancient tools made of stone. "It's amazing to think about how these were used by our ancestors." After a long day of exploring, we finally gathered in the museum's great hall, where we admired the large dinosaur skeleton on display. It was a perfect way to end our visit to the British Museum. "Today was such an amazing experience," Mr. Johnson said. "We have seen history come to life through these artifacts. Each piece tells a story, and it is important to appreciate and learn from our past." As we left the museum, we felt a sense of wonder and appreciation for the history we had encountered. The day had been filled with learning, exploration, and unforgettable moments. On the bus ride back to the hotel, we shared our thoughts about the museum. "I can't believe how much we saw today," Jack said. "It felt like we traveled through time." "I loved learning about different cultures," Sarah added. "It makes me want to read more about history." As we arrived at the hotel, the sun was setting, painting the sky in beautiful shades of orange and pink. We knew that this trip was not only about seeing new places, but also about understanding the world and its diverse histories. "Tomorrow we will explore more of London," Mr. Johnson said as we got off the bus. "Get some rest because we have more adventures ahead." As we settled into our rooms, we couldn't stop talking about our amazing day at the British Museum. We were excited for what the next day would bring, knowing that there were still many stories to uncover in this incredible city. Chapter 6: Exploring London's Landmarks. The next morning, we woke up eager and ready for our last adventure in London. After breakfast, Mr. Johnson announced, "Today, we will visit some of London's most famous landmarks. Are you excited?" Yes, we all cheered in unison, our enthusiasm filling the room. We boarded the bus and started our journey through the vibrant streets of London. The city was alive with energy, and as we drove, we admired the iconic red double-decker buses and black cabs. Our first stop was the magnificent Tower of London. As we approached, the ancient stone walls stood tall and proud. The Tower of London has a rich history, Mr. Johnson explained. It has served many purposes over the years, including a royal palace, a fortress, and a prison. We entered the tower and were greeted by the yeoman warders, also known as beefeaters. They welcomed us with smiles and began to share stories about the tower's fascinating past. "Did you know that this tower was built over 1,000 years ago?" one of the beefeaters said. "It is home to the crown jewels, which include the royal crowns and other treasures." We were excited to see the crown jewels, and the beefeater led us to a room filled with sparkling crowns, scepters, and gold artifacts. "Wow!" I gasped as I gazed at the dazzling crowns. "They are so beautiful." After exploring the Tower of London, we made our way to the nearby Tower Bridge. The iconic bridge spans the River Thames and is one of London's most recognizable landmarks. "Let's take some photos," Sarah suggested, and we eagerly gathered in front of the bridge for a group picture. The sun shone brightly, making the blue and white of the bridge stand out against the sky. As we walked across the bridge, Mr. Johnson explained. Tower Bridge was completed in 1894 and is still in use today. It opens to allow large ships to pass through. We admired the view of the river and the city skyline from the bridge. It was breathtaking. After crossing the bridge, we hopped back on the bus and headed to Buckingham Palace. When we arrived, we saw the beautiful palace with its grand facade and manicured gardens. "This is where the Queen of England lives," Mr. Johnson said excitedly. "If we are lucky, we might see the changing of the guard ceremony." We waited patiently, and soon enough, we were treated to the sight of the guards in their iconic red uniforms and tall black hats marching in perfect formation. The atmosphere was filled with excitement as tourists gathered to witness this traditional ceremony. "Look at them march," Jack exclaimed, pointing at the guards. "They are so disciplined." After the ceremony, we took some time to explore the gardens surrounding the palace. The flowers were in full bloom, adding vibrant colors to the landscape. Next, we headed to the Houses of Parliament and Big Ben. As we arrived, we were in awe of the magnificent Gothic architecture. Big Ben, the famous clock tower, stood tall and majestic. Big Ben is one of the most famous clocks in the world, Mr. Johnson explained. It has been keeping time since 1859. We took more pictures, capturing the beauty of the architecture against the blue sky. This is like a scene from a movie, I thought to myself, overwhelmed with joy. After our visit to Big Ben, we made our way to the London Eye. The giant Ferris wheel offered a stunning view of the city. "Let's ride the London Eye," Sarah suggested, and everyone eagerly agreed. As we climbed into our glass capsule, excitement filled the air. Slowly, the London Eye began to rise, and we could see the entire city beneath us. "Look at the view," I shouted, pointing at the sprawling city below. "This is amazing." From up high, we could see landmarks like Buckingham Palace, the River Thames, and even the distant Tower Bridge. The ride gave us a new perspective on the city, and we felt grateful for the experiences we had. After the ride, we headed to a nearby park for lunch. We spread out our picnic blankets and enjoyed sandwiches, chips, and refreshing drinks. As we ate, we chatted about our favorite moments from the trip. "I loved the museum," Sarah said, "but seeing the changing of the guard was really special too." With hearts full of joy and memories that would last a lifetime, we boarded the bus one final time. As we drove back to the hotel, we looked out the window at the beautiful city of London, knowing that we had learned so much and experienced the wonders of this incredible place. As we reached the hotel, we couldn't help but feel a mix of sadness and happiness. This trip had come to an end, but the memories would stay with us forever. "Thank you for an amazing trip, Mr. Johnson," I said as we stepped off the bus. "I can't wait to share all these stories with my family." "Me too," Sarah added, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "I learned so much." As we walked inside, we knew that this educational tour had not only taught us about history, but had also brought us closer together as friends. This journey to the UK would forever hold a special place in our hearts, and we eagerly looked forward to our next adventure together.